Hey everyone, I was stumbling around chess.com earlier and I saw that there was a game between Leela ChessZero and an engine called FatFritz. So I did some research into this and it looks as though Chessbase created this engine based on Leela and AlphaZero. So AlphaZero is called AlphaZero because it literally started from its own games at nothing, where it just self-played and self-learned to get to an amazing standard. But FatFritz also does the same thing, but is actually focused on the mega database and top grandmaster games and engine games. As well as play as itself, it's also got some amazing games at its disposal, and we'll see what happens in this game where it plays Leela as black. So in this game, it was 5 minutes each with the 5-second increment. Again, Leela is white and FatFritz is black, and the book move goes as follows. So we get an English opening with c4, knight to f6, knight to f3, e6, g3, d5, bishop g2, bishop e7, queen c2, both sides castle, and then c6 is played, followed by d4 and b6. White plays knight to d2, black plays bishop to b7, and now e4 from white, and this is actually the end of the book move. So what do we have here? Well, it looks as though white's pressurising d5 with the bishop on g2 and the e4 and c4 pawn, whereas black has a pawn on c6 and e6 to defend, and also this bishop on b7. And actually this is very typical of his opening, very typical structure. And FatFritz continues with the typical ideas of playing knight to a6 as his next move. The point is that maybe black wants to infiltrate b4 with the knight and also push for c5 and undermine white's centre and try and collapse it. Leela plays a3 to stop any knight b4 ideas and prepare the move b4 as well. FatFritz plays c5 and opens up the bishop on b7, and this is again a typical idea played in many games, and now the c5 pawn undermines d4. So Leela captures on d5, the pawn recaptures, Leela takes on c5, and now knight takes c5 is played, followed by b4 from Leela, hitting the knight on c5. The knight has a couple of squares to go to. Knight to e6 is an option, but play would probably continue with bishop b2, and it gets rather drawish after rook c8, pinning this c4 pawn. White will play knight to e5, opening up the g2 bishop, raking down and pinning this d5 pawn against the bishop. But after queen c7, rook c1, d takes c4, queen takes c4, it gets rather drawish after bishop takes g2. Queen takes c7, rook takes c7, rook takes c7, and knight takes c7, followed by king takes, rook d8 and knight to c4. And both sides have very equal material, and this is a dead draw at the moment with no advantage for either side. So maybe this is the reason why FatFritz didn't play knight to e6. Instead he opted for knight c to e4, and Leela just takes, the knight recaptures, and again Leela's trying to open the bishop up, so they play knight to d2, and this knight hits e4 and also defends the c4 square at the same time. And I was thinking here maybe black could play the move f5. This looks rather nice because it holds on to the centre, and if Leela takes on e4, then take with the d pawn, and white can play rook d1, and queen e8 will be played, followed by bishop to e3 and bishop maybe to c6 to threaten, let's say, bishop a4. But white can actually play the move c5 here. The point is that if bishop a4, there's a check on c4. So once b takes c5 is played, there's check, king h8, bishop takes c5, bishop b5, queen c1, takes, and again this looks rather drawish for both sides. The difference in the structures though may make a difference because white's got two pawns on the other side of the board connected. So this may be a slight edge to white, but still it's very drawish indeed. However, f5 was not played by FatFritz. It instead played bishop to f6, hitting the rook on a1, and Leela played a standard move, bishop to b2 to block, and FatFritz plays rook c8 to pin the c4 pawn against the queen. But Leela undoes all this by bishop takes f6 and tries to clear the lines. If queen takes f6, this just loses a pawn due to knight takes, pawn takes and bishop takes, followed by another capture, so white will just win a pawn. So black does have to take this with the knight. Knight takes f6 was played. And now rook a c1 from Leela, and this bishop on g2 does a great job of pinning this pawn on d5 against the bishop on b7. This forces now FatFritz to move it to a6, and now it pins the pawn on c4. But Leela can easily get out of this. They play queen a4, hitting the bishop. The bishop takes on c4, knight takes c4 is played, pawn takes, and momentarily black is a pawn up. But Leela can just calmly take this pawn on a7, and now it's equal material. The only difference is that black has a knight and white has a bishop. And to me it looks the bishop is a bit more powerful than the knight. But actually in this game the two minor pieces don't make that much of a difference. FatFritz plays knight g4, and there's a bit of manoeuvring. Queen a4 was played by Leela, knight to e5 from black, queen b5. I like this move because it stops black from connecting the two pawns together. And now white also attacks the knight on e5. FatFritz defends with queen f6. h3 from Leela to give the king a safety square. Also stops knight g4 ideas. Black plays c3, pushing their passed pawn one step closer. But Leela plays rook to e1, hitting the knight, and it jumps in to c4, threatening to play knight takes a3. Now here an interesting line was actually bishop to d5. So if knight takes then queen a6, and it's really rather difficult for black to get this knight out of this corner without losing a pawn, let's say. So bishop d5 was an interesting idea, but black could play queen to d4, and then there's a lot of exchanges once again. Bishop takes c4, takes, and white can play rook c2. Overall this doesn't really offer much advantage because it looks as though white may win the pawn on c3, but black can double. After king f1 there's g6, rook e3, so white is putting pressure on this pawn, but slowly. After king to d1, white's idea is to put the king onto b3, but after h5, king c1 and g5, and all these several moves, black can actually start attacking white's structure with rook f6. If f3 to defend this pawn, then there's rook d8. So black does offer this pawn up, but then comes rook to d2. After g4, h4, it's going to be very difficult for white to progress in this position. The rook on d2 is an excellent piece, stops white's king from moving off the first rank, and also threatens rook h2 as well. And now this f3 pawn is also a backwards pawn, thanks to black's powerful two pawns on g5 and h4. So that all stemmed from a bishop d5. I just thought it was a bit of an interesting variation. But actually Leela just played a4 to sidestep this and push the pawn one step closer to promotion. Black played knight to d2. Leela pushed again. a5. Takes was played. The pawn recaptures. And here FatFritz decided to try and swap off the minor pieces with knight to f3. Leela accepted and queen takes was played. Rook to e3, queen to f6 to defend this c3 pawn, and Leela played king to g2, c2 was played, rook e2, so hitting this pawn twice now. Again FatFritz had multiple options here. Queen d4 was one idea. The point is that if, let's say rook takes on c2, there's rook takes and check on e4, which would win a rook for black. So after queen to d4, white can continue with queen to b3, but after rook c3, queen a2, rook c4, black's got a trick, because after takes they can play rook a4. Once the queen moves they can take on a5, and again this is a dead draw. So I think definitely FatFritz made a mistake here, should have gone queen d4, because after they played the move queen to c3, protecting the pawn twice, but now Leela gains an advantage by trading the two rooks for the pawn and queen. They take on c2, queen takes c2 is played, rook takes c2 and rook takes c2. So it's usually good to have a queen traded for two rooks. However, in this position black actually comes under some pressure because of this a5 pawn. Leela plays a6, it's one square closer to promotion. FatFritz played rook c7 to stop it gaining any more squares, but now queen b6 was played, hitting the rook. It goes to e7, and after a7, rook a8, it looks as though black is picking up this pawn. But actually after queen to b8 check, black is under some pressure because they can't capture that queen due to A takes B8. So rook E8 is forced, and the point is after queen to B7, black's forced to now stay on this 8th rank. There's no way to move off it without white progressing this A pawn to a queen. So black is now stuck, and this is perfect for white. And if you're a human player, this is an ideal position to play against your opponent. So after H6 played by FatFritz, Leela slowly moves up with G4, and black goes back and forth rook AC8, king G3, moves the rook to D8, king H4, rook F8, and again the point is black can't ever get off this 8th rank. G5 was played, H takes G, king takes, and rook C8. And again we just see Leela progressing with H4. Black has some options with maybe rook C5 check, but after going backwards, black has to go back to the 8th rank again to stop white's promoting. And then they can just play F4 and again just push these two pawns up and try and mate the black king. So back to the game. After H4 was played by white, FatFritz played king H7, Leela checks, king G8, and just played H5. FatFritz threw in rook C5 check, but the king sidestepped this, and again the rook has to go backwards. H6 was now played by Leela, and this is a very clever idea. The point is, if black played G6 to try and blockade, Leela could play queen to D4, threatening mate. The point is after F6, they can play queen to D7, threatening mate again. And if rook C4 check, there's king G3, and if rook C3 check, there's F3, and the checks have run out for black. And if rook F7, white can promote to a queen, and this is game over for black. So after H6, black has to take this pawn. So G takes H6 is played, and this allows white now just to come up the board with king to H5. FatFritz tries rook to E8 to attack the queen, but now comes a series of checks to manoeuvre the queen very nicely. This is called triangulation, so we'll see this in action now. So there's check on G4, king F8, another check on B4, king G7, another check, and the queen manages to go to D6 with a check. And the point is after king G8, white just plays F4 and is now threatening to play F5 and F6 and mate the black king on G7. Fritz tries rook A8 to attack the pawn, but again Leela just defends with queen to D7. Rook D8 is played, but now queen to B7, and the queen can't be attacked again on the 8th rank thanks to this A7 pawn covering the square. King G7 was played by Fritz, and now queen to C6, and everything works in Leela's favour very nicely. The point is that after, if rook takes A7 from black, white will take on H6 with check, king G8 is the only move, and queen G5 will be played with check, king H7, and queen takes D8, and white's just won a rook. So queen C6 was a very clever move, and the point is that now white can take on H6 freely next move. Possibly the only move that black could play is rook H8 to defend this pawn, but then I think white will just play F5, and eventually black will get in some sort of zugzwang here. King F8 can't be played in this position due to moves like F6, and this just stops black's king from ever getting out, and mate will come in less than 4 moves in this position. For instance, let's say rook D8, then we can get queen, and that's pretty much game over and all she wrote. So after rook H8 there's F5, king H7 is also another option, but again F6 is very powerful, and moves like queen E4 will soon follow, and again this queen is still linked to this A8 square, so it's a very nice play for white here. But back to the game, so queen C6 was played, threatening this H6 pawn. In the game, rook DC8 was played by FatFritz, and now check was played by Leela. And after king G8, queen B6 was played to defend the pawn once again. Rook E8 to flounder away, F5, and FatFritz plays rook E7 to attack this A7 pawn. But again, Leela has this nice combination of just queen B8, and this is forcing black to play rook E8 again. Queen B7 once again. So this B8 square is covered by A7, so the queen can't be attacked again. FatFritz plays King to G7, and after King to G5, Rook to G8, finally white can get this F6 move in, which is key to winning the game. So with check, and to be honest, either side loses. But in the game, FatFritz played King H8 check, so the rook does check the king, but Leela just sidesteps, and there's no way for black to win this position. The F7 pawn is attacked by the queen, so it gets defended. And there's two ways, or a couple of ways to win this game. The quickest is probably just queen to G2, and threaten mate on G7. But in the game, King F4 was played by Leela, and after King G8, now they played Queen to G2 with check. The king went to H8, and Queen G7 was mate. So this was a very even game throughout, and I feel like FatFritz got a bit unlucky with what they played, where they got 2 rooks for the queen. To be honest, the difference between this game was just this nice pass pawn on A7, which hindered black's 2 rooks. This would have been an ideal game if you're a human player, because basically all black could do is flounder about on the 8th rank at the end, and white was free pretty much just to push these pawns at will to defeat the black king. Anyway, it's exciting times because there's some very powerful engines out there showing us some great games that we can all learn from. And I hope you enjoyed my analysis of this video. If you think I missed something, do comment below. Also, please like and subscribe to the channel if you do enjoy more chess videos, because I'm going to be posting more very soon. Anyway, I hope to see you next time. Thanks very much.